mastery over the complexities of the human body. This isn't just about cramming for your exams. It's about building a rock-solid mental framework, one that lets you confidently walk into a busy ER and know exactly what you're looking at. It's about cracking the code of the musculoskeletal system. So how do we do it? How do we build that framework? And more importantly, how do we make this knowledge stick so it's right there at your fingertips when you need it the most? All right, let's dive in. Look, the key is not about brute force memorization. Anyone can do that. It's about using clever tools. We're talking mnemonics, powerful analogies, and unforgettable mental images that are going to lock this knowledge in for good. Okay, first up, the upper limb. It's an absolute marvel of engineering, right? But it's also a serious hotspot for injuries. So let's start cracking the code on some of the most common high-yield fractures you're definitely going to encounter. I want you to picture this. A patient comes in after a fall on an outstretched hand. Classic story. You're probably looking at a Colles fracture. And the big giveaway? That dinner fork deformity. It looks just like it sounds. And trust me, once you see it, you will never, ever forget it. Now, how do we remember the key features? Easy. Just think MEAT. M-E-A-T. The M is absolutely crucial. That's for median nerve impairment. It's the most common complication, so you have to test for it. E is for eating with that dinner fork deformity. And A and T point you right to the specific motor and sensory problems you'll find on your exam. Simple, right? Now this is so important. Specificity matters. A mid-shaft humerus fracture. Your brain should immediately scream radial nerve and picture a wrist drop. An anterior shoulder dislocation, you gotta be thinking axillary nerve and weakness and abduction. Getting these pairs right isn't just for exams, it's fundamental. All right, let's head on down to the lower limb. The anatomy here is complex, and honestly, the stakes are even higher. We're gonna start with the knee, the body's biggest and arguably most complicated joint. So the menisci, what are they? Just think of them as the knee's shock absorbers. They're like little cushions. So how do you check for a tear in a cushion? Well, you squish it, right? And that's exactly what clinical tests like the Apley compression test do. We're literally squishing the cushion to see if it's injured. It's that intuitive. Foot drop. This can really trip students up. And this quote just nails the reason why. Here's the key takeaway. I want you to burn this into your memory. The peroneal nerve is the same thing as the fibular nerve. They're used interchangeably. Just knowing that one simple fact is going to save you a world of confusion.
Okay, hip dislocations. This is a classic tale of two positions. The most common one, a posterior dislocation. Think of a dashboard injury in a car crash. That's going to give you a shortened, internally rotated leg. And the nerve at risk? The big one, the sciatic nerve. The less common anterior dislocation is basically the mirror image, an externally rotated, abducted leg with the obturator nerve in the danger zone.
And now we pivot. We're moving from the world of trauma to a totally different kind of conflict, an internal battlefield. We're talking about inflammatory arthritis, where the body's own immune system turns into the aggressor. It's time for the duel of the crystals, gout and pseudogout. They can look so similar clinically, but you know what never lies? The synovial fluid. In gout, you'll see needle-shaped negatively birefringent crystals. For pseudogout, they're rhomboid-shaped and positively birefringent. Just remember this little trick for gout. They're yellow when parallel to the light. You'll nail it every time. Rheumatoid arthritis, RA, is notorious for its widespread, symmetric destruction of joints. It can attack almost anything. But here is a fantastic clinical pearl. There is one joint it almost always spares, the DIP joint. That's the very last joint on your finger. So just remember this little phrase, RA patients still got the dip. We are now entering the red zone. Pay attention. These aren't just pathologies. These are absolute clinical emergencies. These are the conditions where time is tissue and every single minute you delay can lead to permanent, devastating disability. Compartment syndrome is a surgical nightmare. It's a cascade. A trauma causes swelling, which increases the pressure inside a closed compartment, which then crushes the blood vessels, leading to ischemia. The clock is ticking. If you even suspect it, you need to act fast with a fasciotomy to relieve that pressure and save the limb. There's no time to waste. When you see a hot, swollen, painful joint and you suspect infection, septic arthritis, the rule is absolute. You treat first and you ask questions later. You do not wait for culture results. You immediately start empiric IV antibiotics and you get that joint drained. Any hesitation literally destroys cartilage and can ruin that joint forever. All right, for our final section, we're entering the pantheon of bone pathologies. We're going to look at the classic must-know signs of bone tumors and the pharmacology we use to protect the skeleton itself. You know, radiographs of bone tumors have their own secret language. And this, right here, this is your Rosetta Stone. An osteosarcoma often shows up as a sunburst pattern. Ewing sarcoma is famous for its layered, onion skinning look. And a giant cell tumor, it can look just like a cluster of soap bubbles inside the bone. These visual buzzwords are your key to the diagnosis. So how do we treat conditions like osteoporosis? One of our biggest tools is a class of drugs called bisphosphonates. But how do they actually work? Well, think of your bones as having a construction crew, the osteoblasts that build bone, and a demolition crew, the osteoclasts that break it down. Bisphosphonates are basically a cease and desist order that you deliver directly to the demolition crew. It tells them to stop work now. So after all this, what's the big takeaway? It's that this stuff isn't about just memorizing a list of facts. It's about building a dynamic clinical toolkit that's going to allow you to confidently and competently take care of your patients. It's about learning to read the body's signals and knowing exactly how to respond. So the final question is, how do you make sure all of this sticks? How do you make sure this code we've been talking about gets permanently written into your clinical mind so it doesn't just fade away after the exam? Well, the secret, it's all about a continuous cycle. A cycle of learning, applying, and then refining that knowledge over and over again. That's the only way you achieve true